Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea. It's an honor and a privilege, as it is every day, to have you guys joining me here as we talk about our favorite things in the world, movies and movie news, and it's open mic time, guys. We're here to talk about anything you guys want to talk about. Now, Monday through Friday on the John Campea Show, we save a little bit of time for some live questions, but on open mic, this is just like an open forum live radio talk show. Just right on in and talk about anything you guys want to talk about. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into it, and we're going to get started with the first question today. This comes to us from Dimsum05, who writes, I think Victory Celebration is better than Yub Nub. Oh, Dim Sum. It always gets me choked up when I see the Han, Luke, and Leia with that wonderful emotional music. Okay, hey, it's all subjective, and if that one works for you better, that's awesome. I'm happy for you. I think it sucks. That's my opinion. I think it completely sucks. I think it's a complete betrayal of the spirit of the ending of the original film. Because the Yub Nub thing also, first of all, it felt way more celebratory than the new music. The second thing about it is that I loved the ongoing juxtaposition of the idea of the technological versus the natural. And that's one of the things I love most about Return of the Jedi, especially the involvement of the Ewoks on the moon of Endor. It's a giant metaphor, really, of the industrial complex versus the natural world in many ways. And of course, you know, the Ewoks had the rebels fighting alongside of them as well. But this beautiful juxtaposition of the Empire never even sees a threat in the natural environment. The Empire doesn't see the natural world as any kind of a threat, and yet that, when the rebels align themselves with it, is what ultimately defeats them. And I think the Yub Nub song was an extension of that. And again, it just felt way more celebratory. It felt way more in context with the film itself. And again, for you, the other music works better. That's fine. That's totally cool. That's the subjectivity of film. But for me, it's no questions asked. I think that music sucks. I think the Yub Nub thing is way more consistent with the feel of the film. It's way more celebratory, and it just feels like it fits in better. But again, that's my opinion. You have a different one. Nothing wrong with that. All right, let's move on here. The next one comes to us from Drew G, who writes, John, I feel for you about axe murder. I watched Inception with my fiance. It was her first time viewing it, and she didn't think it was amazing like I do. So for those of you who don't know what Drew's talking about, I put on my social media the other day that I sat down and watched So I Married an Axe Murderer. That movie's 25 years old now. I just about fell out of my chair when I realized that So I Married an Axe Murderer is now like 25 years old. I just about like choked on whatever it was I was drinking at the time. But anyway, Anne had never seen So I Married an Axe Murderer, the classic Mike Myers film. That movie is amazing. I love that. Hit, move, no. Anyway, oh, I hate the Colonel with his beady eyes. Oh, you're going to buy my chicken. Oh, God, that movie. I can just think about 50 lines in that movie that just cracked me up. Anyway, and I was so excited to show that movie to Anne because I have developed a pretty good sense of, not that Anne likes everything I like, but I've developed a pretty good sense of what I think Anne would like. And I thought for sure Anne would like So I Married an Axe Murderer because I love it, and I really thought the humor would work for her, and she didn't like it. And so I kind of tweeted out, said, Anne didn't like So I Married an Axe Murderer. Rethinking my marriage. Yeah, it was painful. With Inception, I guess it depends on your audience. Like, part of the reason I was so dismayed that Anne didn't like So I Married an Axe Murderer, and this happens from time to time, but it was something where I pegged her wrong. Like, I thought it would be something she would like. Not because I loved it, but I honestly thought it would be a type of movie that she would like. So you got to take that into consideration too, not just whether or not you think it's something amazing, but the added oomph to me was that I thought it was something she would like, and I was wrong about that. I'm like, I got to question everything now. Anyway, that's kind of how I fit. But, oh my God, if you haven't watched So I Married an Axe Murderer, dear heavens, he carved out the bitch's eyes. Anyway, all right, let's move on. Thunder Knight 19 writes, I am a big Monty Python fan. Oh, who isn't, dude? However, I have never liked the ending to Holy Grail. I know it's physical Monty Python, or it's typical Monty Python, but I just felt it ended flat. Your thoughts? Okay, so first of all, one of the greatest comedies ever, Monty Python Quest for the Holy Grail. A shrubbery. Anyway, so, but the end is like completely out of left field, right? It's, well, I mean, not really, because the end comes, but throughout the film, there's these little bits and pieces that allude to what's coming later, but out of nowhere, big bit of a spoiler alert, Monty Python and Quest for the Holy Grail has been around forever. But anyway, the movie ends with this big siege, this big battle's about to happen, and literally the modern day police show up. And it's ridiculous, and it's silly. But you are right, Thunder Knight, when you point out that, Monty Python is silly. I mean, that's what Monty Python is. Monty Python is silly. It's typical Monty Python. And that word silly really is the underpinning of everything Monty Python does. They go for silly. Like just silly and ridiculous, which is so contrarian to what our general perceptions of what the average British person is, and that's kind of why they do what they do. And you're right. I mean, I don't like the ending. I don't. But it's never really thrown me because it is, as you pointed out, typical Monty Python behavior. It's silly. And the ending is just completely silly and ridiculous. It makes no sense whatsoever, but that's Monty Python. So, while I am not a fan of the ending of Monty Python: A Quest for the Holy Grail, it's never really thrown me. It's never kind of taken me out of it or ruined it for me or anything like that. Yeah, I wish they ended it differently, but it is Monty Python. It's exactly what I signed up for. So, there you go. All right, the next question comes to us from the man with the plan who writes, John, tomorrow is the big day. On a scale of 1 to 1,000, how excited are you? Okay, so for those of you, I mean, if you watch me, you know what he's talking about, but I'm going to go see Avengers Infinity War tomorrow. It's the world premiere tomorrow. I am stupid excited. Cannot wait to see this thing. Again, I'm going to be shooting, Ann and I are going to go down like maybe 2 hours early down to Hollywood so I can do some live video and take lots of pictures and do some live video of the area so I can take you guys there with me. So make sure you're paying close attention tomorrow to my social media feeds because I'm going to be doing stuff down there. I'm going to try to make you feel like you're there with me. Now, obviously, once I go into the event, I can't take my camera in there with me, obviously. But, I mean, I'm going to show you around downtown. I'm going to show you around the red carpet area. I'm going to let you see how it's all set up and hopefully help you guys feel like you're there with me. On a scale of 1 to 1,000, I would say 910. I'm 910. Like, not quite as excited as if it was a brand new Star Wars premiere, but that aside, new Star Wars World premiere aside, I'm about as excited as you can get to go see a movie like this. So yeah, completely stoked. Cannot wait. Can't wait to share my thoughts with you guys. Okay, Media Fanatic writes, Hey John, hope you and your family are doing well. Just saw A Quiet Place, and man, did it have a great score / soundtrack, so fitting, and was surprised. You know, it's funny, I went to go see A Quiet Place again yesterday too. I ended up having like a couple hours free in the afternoon because Anne ended up going out of town for a family get-together last night. So my buddy Soul, he gives me a call and he's like, hey, I haven't seen A Quiet Place yet. I want to go see it at 1:50. I'm like, okay, cool, let's go. So I went to go watch it again. And again, completely floored by how great that movie is. But it's really funny that you bring that up, Media Fanatic, because on yesterday's show, somebody mentioned, hey, I don't even feel like the movie needed a soundtrack. Needed is a strong word. Needed is a strong word. Would the movie have been okay without a soundtrack? Sure. A Quiet Place would have been okay without a soundtrack. That being said, any movie, well, almost any movie could be okay without its soundtrack. But the soundtrack in A Quiet Place does what a soundtrack is supposed to do, and that's elevate the tone of the scene. When there were scenes of tenderness, the music was so perfect to elevate that sensation of tenderness in the scene. When the scene called for regret or pain, the music that played elevated the sense of regret and pain. When the scene called for tension and terror, the music elevated the tension and terror. So while I agreed yesterday, yeah, does A Quiet Place need a soundtrack? No, it doesn't need it, but it elevated the movie. The movie would not have been as good as it is without that music, because the music did exactly what it's supposed to do, which was elevate the tone of the individual scenes. And you're right, it was brilliant. I mean, and here's an interesting thing. It's not a soundtrack I would pop in my car and listen to in my car, because out of context with the movie, I don't know that anything in there is particularly catchy, but that's not the point of a soundtrack. The point of the score is to elevate the scenes, and that's what the music did perfectly. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it too, Media Fanatic. All right, let's move on here. Orange Hand writes, how lucky was Wade in Ready Player One that the girl he met online was a hot girl? As Ash said, she could have been a 300-pound dude named Chuck. More realistic. I mean, that's true. That's true. I mean, look, I have been very lucky. Here's an interesting thing. My movie that I did called The Anniversary, it's in a very 10% kind of way, it's kind of semi-autobiographical, right? In a very semi-10% kind of way. But part of my movie, The Anniversary, was looking at the stigmatism of online dating. And now it's been addressed a lot now, but back about 10 years ago, it wasn't addressed as much. And I remember, especially being a guy who was single, moving back to Ontario, Canada. Most of my friends were married or paired off. I couldn't meet, I mean, and I worked like when I wasn't working or in school, because I went back to school at the same time. So I was working, I was doing the movie blog. So I was working my law job, doing the movie blog, and I was going to school. I had no time for anything. And my friends kept trying to get me to try online dating. So, and I kept putting it off because there was this stigma attached to online dating, right? And I didn't want to try it. And that's exactly like the whole fear. It's like, if you start talking to a woman, oh my gosh, it's a 300-pound dude. Which is totally cool if you're into that. Nothing wrong with that. But that's not my thing. So I was totally terrified of that. Anyway, and I'm not going to tell you the story of my first online dating experience, but it was an amazing one that turned into a bit of a nightmare at the same time. Maybe I'll tell the story someday. But then I started using online dating, and you know, I had a great experience using online dating. I did. And then I met some wonderful people. For very brief periods of time, I dated some really cool women. And then I met Anne. And now I didn't meet Anne online. I met her in person, so that's a different story. But I mean, I had great experiences with it. But you're right, that is the constant fear of anybody today, and any friends that I have that are single and using online dating, is that that's still kind of the predominant big fear, right? So anyway, there's that. Okay, next one comes to us from Frank and Beans, who writes, where'd it go? There it is. Frank and Beans writes, what's up, John? Canada question, okay. Canadians are so nice. We generally are. When it's hockey, it's civil war. So after the games, do you guys hug it out or anything? Thanks. Oh, yeah. For the most part, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I'll continue to talk crap about the Montreal Canadiens, because like the greatest rivalry in all of sports. You can take Lakers, Celtics. You can take all of Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens. Greatest rivalry in the history of sports. Because it's also a huge cultural rivalry at the same time. But I've been in sports bars in Canada where people there's like the crowds have been split wearing two different jerseys, right? And blah, 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 and then it's over and everybody's high-fiving each other. Great game, oh! I mean, that's the difference a lot of times between Canadian culture and American culture, right? Like in American culture, like violence could erupt in the parking lots, right? If there's people there with the wrong color jersey on, violence can erupt in the parking lots. In like Canadian sporting venues, people will like give each other the business. Your team sucks, blah, 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 blah. But when the game's over, everybody's high-fiving each other and having a good time. I mean, this is kind of the nature of it. But yeah, it can feel like it gets really intense though in hockey, especially once you get two Canadian teams playing each other. It gets really intense there, because the best rivalry is sibling rivalry, right? And that's when the Canadian hockey fans get even more into it when it's against other Canadian teams. It's hard to explain if you're not Canadian. It's difficult to explain, but you have to be there. Okay, let's see. What's next here? Mary. And Mary writes, just wanted to say hello and yabami. Yabami! Whoo! Yabami! Whoo! Anyway, I just wanted to say hello and yabami to everyone in the live chat. It's become a real community full of awesome people, and it's all down to you, John. Oh my gosh. Roll in that filth. Well, thank you so much, Mary. And yeah, that is one of the things I love about doing this is that the online community here has really become probably, I feel safe in saying, probably the most positive online community I've ever been a part of. I mean, don't get me wrong, everybody says stupid things here and there, blah, blah, but for the most part, I've never been a part of a live community like this where there is so much, and don't misunderstand, like if you're relatively new here, don't get me wrong, you're gonna see lots of disagreement and debate, but it's always done as fellow film fans, you know? Debating, kind of like what I was just talking about Canadian rivalry hockey teams. Like we'll debate and argue issues, but at the end of the day, we're like, hey, but you're a film fan, so that's awesome. You know, that's kind of the attitude we have around here. And I don't think that's really down to me. I think that's down to the people in the community. The people in the online community are the ones who foster that and make it a reality. I mean, I can encourage it, and I try to encourage it, but ultimately it's really the individual people in the community. And I hope, like, what was it, Dim Sum in the first place? You know, that exchange between Dim Sum and me at the beginning of the show, when Dim Sum's like, hey, I don't like the Yub Nub music, I like the new music. And I'm like, I hate the new music, but you like it, so that's great. Here's why I don't, and here's why I prefer this one, and there we go. And it's fun. It's a film fan discussion without going, you like that? You're a fucking idiot, blah, 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 which is what you'll get in most places, right? And I really think that's down to you guys more than me. So thank you to everybody who makes the online live community a fun place to be. So thank you so much for that. Okay, and thanks for sending that in, Mary. I appreciate that. The Chimp writes in, do you think Leia could appear in episode 9 if they retool any of the footage of her that was cut from episodes 7 and 8 and work them into episode 9? No, that would be a horrible mistake. That would be a horrible mistake. Because then you're changing your movie to fit the footage you have. And that's not what you're supposed to do. The characters serve the movie. The movie does not serve the characters. And I think you're getting into some very, very dangerous ground. And I think it'll become really obvious if they just take discarded scenes from Leia and try to shoehorn them into the movie to try to make a scene that fits the discarded stuff. That's not the way you're supposed to do it. So, I mean, look, it's possible that they have a total brain fart over there and do that, but I think it would be a drastic mistake. I think it would be a horrendous mistake to do that. You guys know how I feel. The best option is to recast Leia. That is the only way to properly honor Carrie Fisher, is to recast the role and carry this character across the finish line for her, since she can't do it herself. That's how I feel about it. I feel it's disrespectful to write the character out before bringing the character to its conclusion. Carrie Fisher spent a lifetime bringing us this character, and to not now pick up the ball for her and bring the character to its true conclusion and just abandon the character, I think is the most disrespectful thing in the world we could do to Carrie Fisher. Absolutely the most disrespectful thing in the world. I think you need to recast. That's my opinion at any rate. But hey, look, I don't expect that they're going to do that. I do think they're just going to write the character out one way or the other. But I think I really would be against the idea of just using old footage of her and kind of shoehorning it into the new movie. I think that's a dangerous thing to do, so I don't like the idea personally. Maybe there's some of you guys who do like it, and that's cool. But for me, I think it's a bad idea. Let's see. Cole Scott writes, rank the Star Wars movies worst to best in your opinion. Okay, so the worst is Attack of the Clones. The next up is Phantom Menace. The next up is Revenge of the Sith. The next one up, going up significantly from that, is The Last Jedi. The next up from that is Rogue One, and the next one up from that is The Force Awakens. But sometimes I flip-flop the Rogue One and Force Awakens. Next one up from that is Star Wars A New Hope. Next one up from that is Empire Strikes Back. Next one up from that is Return of the Jedi. So that's how I order them. Okay, let's see. Next one comes us from Ben Rayner and writes, hey John, happy Sunday. Thank you so much, Ben. Have you read James Cameron's thoughts on Avengers fatigue and how he's hoping we get some because he wants more quote-unquote original sci-fi? Yes, I have. However, I'm not going to comment on it much right now because I need to make my own separate video of that. And actually, as soon as I'm done this particular show, I'm going to start working on a video on, pardon me, James Cameron's comments. Because I believe that deserves its own video. And I'm going to do that video a little bit later once this show is done today. So great topic to bring up, Ben. It's so good that I can't address it right now because I'm going to be addressing it in its own separate video in just a little bit. But thank you for bringing that up. All right, next one comes to us from Spencer Smothers, who writes, do you think Feige will step down after Avengers 4? I think there's a good chance Feige steps down after Avengers 4. I do. My mic stand must be loose because I just noticed that my microphone is starting to come into shot. I don't have time to go around and fix it. You guys will just have to put up with the fact that the mic is now sitting there in shot. It must be dropping a little bit. Actually, let me see if I can at least tighten it up a bit so it doesn't drop anymore. Anyway, okay. I think there's a possibility. It's like a coach, a sporting coach, right? Like once you've been in the game for so long and you've won so many championships with your team, and let's face it, the MCU, if movies was a sporting event, the MCU has won lots of championships, okay? And there's literally nothing left for you to do. Your movies have broken various box office records all over the place. You have elevated your franchise to the most popular franchise in the world at the moment. Where you're cranking out 3, at some point, maybe even 4 films a year. And it's beloved. I mean, what else is there to do? At that point, as a creative person, Kevin Feige is ultimately at his core, he's a creative person. He's an executive, but he's also a creative person. At some point, you start thinking about, what's my next challenge? What is my next challenge? To keep yourself fresh and sharp, what's my next challenge? Because let's put it this way. Kevin Feige is now, his name is going to be in the record books for film fans. But if he leaves the MCU and either starts a new franchise or goes to another existing franchise and elevates that franchise, then he becomes an all-time Hollywood god. At that point, he becomes an entertainment god. If he were to leave the MCU, let's just for argument's sake, let's say he leaves the MCU and goes to the Mission Impossible franchise. And the Mission Impossible franchise already enjoys really decent success, really good success. But let's say he goes to the Mission Impossible franchise and it just goes to the next level. And they start making 1.5 billion each, like across the board, and blah, 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 and becomes like the most popular thing in the world. And he eventually figures out a way to transition away from Tom Cruise because Tom Cruise doesn't want to do it anymore and bring in the new leader of Mission Impossible. And he does. Then he's done the MCU and he did it to another franchise. He becomes a god. I mean, and if you really want to go to the full extent, imagine he decides, I need a new creative challenge, and Warner Brothers hires him. And he decides to go to Warner Brothers to take over the DC cinematic universe. And he decides he's going to reboot it and he's going to start it from scratch and make it what it deserves to be. And it becomes ridiculously successful. He becomes a god. Like right now, he's going down in history for what he's done with the MCU. Absolutely. He's going to be known as like one of the great film executives. But he does that with another franchise. He goes beyond that. I'm not saying he will have the same success with anything else he does. I'm not saying that. But if he did, I mean, then it's the name Kevin Feige becomes synonymous with Hollywood success. So yeah, I do believe, I think there's a solid 50-50 coin flip chance that following Avengers 4, Feige considers leaving. Just for a new challenge. Just to do something new. He's been at this with the MCU a long time. And so, I don't know. I think there's a shot. Okay. Amin Mashe Ekai writes, over under 3.5 named character deaths in Infinity War. Well, I mean, everybody has a name, but like for argument's sake, a character like Okoye is not like Hulk. Let's see, like, if we're saying, it all depends, I mean, how you define named. Like, if you limit name to, okay, the original core Avengers, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, Hawkeye, Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow, Hulk, then you want to include some new ones. Doctor Strange, Black Panther, things like that. If you want to limit it to like 7 or 8 or 9 of the major names, then I'm going to take the under. But if you want to include M'Baku, if you want to include Wong, if you want to include the Wasp, if you want to include like those, if you want to say those are names, then maybe the over on 3.5. But it's impossible to say when I have no idea what your definition of named is. It's hard to say. But if we're going to go with the big upper echelon characters, I'll take the under. I'll take the under on that. Murray for us writes, it's amazing how far Star Wars has come. As a dude, I'm shocked and embarrassed to see the original trilogy had only 2 women, Leia and Mon Mothma. Well, I mean, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. That was filmmaking of the day. And really, when you think about it, I mean, in that era, there weren't a lot of big blockbuster films they might win. Look, that doesn't excuse anything, but I'm saying you have to take cultural context into consideration. And when you really think about it, Star Wars had 3 main characters. You had your Trinity, and one of them was a woman. It was Leia. It was Han, Luke, and Leia. I mean, so yes, I mean, by today's things, how do you make an entire movie where there's only one woman in it? That's a ridiculous notion. It was a little bit different back then. And even then, in that cultural context, a movie, one of the most iconic movie of all time, that had the triumvirate of the 3 major characters, one of the 3 was a female character. And kind of in that sense, Star Wars was ahead of its time in many ways. So, I mean, look, if you're going to be embarrassed about it, you might as well be embarrassed about everything, like half the backwards way. And look, 20 years from now, we're going to look back at the way we think today and be embarrassed. Totally. There are things today we probably just assume, oh yeah, that stuff's totally fine. And 20 years from now, we're going to go, oh my God, I can't believe I used to think that was okay. Like that's the way culture and society evolves and works, right? So I wouldn't be embarrassed by that. I'm actually, if anything, when you really understand the cultural context, I'm actually quite proud of the way that Star Wars was at the forefront of propelling this strong female, not a damsel in distress kind of character. Princess Leia was the prisoner, yeah, but that's because she was so important. Then as soon as the door opens, she takes charge. She goes, okay, listen, from now on, you guys are going to do what I say. And she just takes charge. She's a badass, and she's like one of the triumphant of the Star Wars universe. So if anything, when I look back at the movie, I'm more embarrassed for the era. But within that era, Star Wars was trailblazing what we have today now. What we have today now still has a long way to go. But one of the reasons we have so many great female and strong, empowered female characters today is because of a lot of the groundwork that Star Wars and other films like that laid the groundwork for. So I look back, I'm embarrassed of the era, but within the context of the era, I'm very proud of what Star Wars did. And I continue to be. Next one comes to us from Mr. Hank Dunn. And Mr. Hank Dunn writes, if the deal happens, what movie do you think will happen first in the MCU? Fantastic Four or X-Men? Ooh, well, the easier one to do is Fantastic Four. Because X-Men, I mean, the X-Men's a whole ball of wax, right? The X-Men is not 4 characters. The X-Men and their universe is just ridiculously big. The easiest thing to do would be Fantastic Four. And here's the other thing. Fantastic Four, I think, would have the bigger impact. Because there have been many very successful, very good X-Men universe films. There has yet to be one for Fantastic Four. So if they really want to make a statement, like if the MCU and Marvel wanted to make a statement, if they end up getting the rights back, but if they want to if they really want to come out of the gate and make a statement, the Fantastic Four is the one to do. Because you're like, other studios tried it 4 times. 5 if you want to include the, 4 if you want to include the Corman one. Other studios have tried it and didn't work out so well. And and then they come out of the gate with a Fantastic Four film and crush it, that makes a statement. That makes a huge statement. So I'm going to guess, number one, because it's a little bit easier to do than an X-Men thing. But number two, because it would make a much bigger statement if they did it and were able to succeed. Now, if the MCU gets their hands on Fantastic Four and make a bad Fantastic Four film, then I'm going to give up on the Fantastic Four. I'm like, for some reason, there's a curse on the property that it will never work as a movie. Because if they try it, like, by that time, what is it, 5 times somebody's tried it? Then it's time just to give up on it. Let's see. Jedi Knight and friend to Captain Solo writes, just saw Maze Runner 3. Not a bad little trilogy. See, here's the thing. I was really pleasantly surprised with the first one. Because I thought the first one looked on its surface like just throwaway garbage. It's got some heart. The first one's got some heart, and I enjoyed it. It was kind of exciting. The mystery of it was pretty good. The character development was not bad. I ended up actually quite enjoying Maze. I didn't love it, but I actually ended up quite enjoying it. And so I was looking forward to see what I got to admit, though, I didn't nearly as enjoy number 2 or 3. Number 2 and 3 didn't work for me nearly as well as the first one did. And why that is, why it's not, and those are all big topics for another time. But at the end of the day, though, I will still say I'm glad that the franchise existed because I think that first one is worth watching. And you know, the funny thing is, even though the first one ends with a wide open door to a sequel, if it didn't have a sequel, it totally still works as a standalone film. And, you know, so anybody who asks me, hey, can I just watch the first one? Because I've mentioned before that I liked the first one, but I didn't like the second two, right? And I've had people ask me, it's like, well, can I just watch the first one? Or is it completely incomplete without watching the other two? And the nice thing about the first Maze Runner movie is that, yeah, there's an open door for a sequel, but it totally works as a standalone movie too. It totally works as a standalone movie. Much in the way that, you know, A Quiet Place completely works as a standalone movie. But you could go into sequels if you wanted to. There are open doors for sequels, but it totally works as a standalone film. And I think the same way about the first Maze Runner. But yeah, I don't quite have the same appreciation you have for the other two, unfortunately. So when I think of Maze Runner, I think of a not a bad little movie. You think of it, you think not a bad little trilogy. So we think a little bit differently on that, which is totally fine. All right, Spencer Smothers writes, do you think Paramount gave Cloverfield to Netflix because they saw A Quiet Place as a better horror anthology universe over the Cloverfield universe? No, that had 100% nothing to do with it. I think Paramount chose not to do a theatrical release because they realize it's not that good of a film, and it's not, in my opinion. It's not that good of a film at all. And they realize it's not going to make money. It will cost, I think Paramount realized it's going to cost us more money to put this thing into theaters than we're going to get out of it. So let's take a paycheck from Netflix. Let them just do the release of it. I was really disappointed with that movie. I didn't think that was a very good movie at all. A lot of missed opportunities with that film. But at the end of the day, no. Quiet Place had nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing to do with it. It all had to do with, look, no one's going to come see this. We're not going to make back our money just to even market this thing. So why bother with it? And I think that probably has more to do with it than anything else. Let's see here. Karam Majob writes, directors oversee every aspect of filmmaking, i.e. the film overall. They get Best Director award, not Best Picture. You said the award for Best Picture is for the best film overall. What's the difference between the two? Okay, I get asked this a lot, and there is a really big difference. I'm going to use this, hang with me. I know some of you guys hate it when I use a sports analogy, but this really is the best analogy, okay? Follow along with me here, okay? The director is put in charge by the producers. The movie is the producers. It's their film. They're the ones who get the script. They're the ones who acquire the rights to the movies. They're the ones who hire the directors. They're the ones who put the film together. They're the ones who put the whole project together. And then they go out and hire a director to kind of oversee it on that level, right? And each director, when they approach their movie, they're given certain tools. Some are given better tools than others. Some are given Pauly Shore as their lead actor. Some are given Daniel Day-Lewis as their lead actor. One director clearly has better tools than the other to work with, right? Some are given a better script to work with than the other. Some are given better, but whatever. The director's then there, that once the producers, pull together the bones of the film, the directors then go about to make the film, to oversee everything, to make sure it turns out to be the best that it can be, right? You can have a director who does the best job directing, but it doesn't end up being the best film of the year. Here's a good example, and here's where the sports analogy comes in, okay? Follow me here. Sometimes the team that wins the championship, the coach also wins Coach of the Year. Sometimes. But most of the time, the coach who wins Best Coach of the Year, the coach is in charge of the team. The general manager is the one who drafts the players and puts the pieces in place, but it's the coach who then has to take that and guide the team, right? Quite often, the coach that wins Coach of the Year, so think of the coach as the director, right? The coach who wins Coach of the Year quite often is not the team that wins the championship. Well, why did they win Coach of the Year? Because they're the ones who did the best job with the tools that they had. Because if one coach has a team of nobodies that aren't all that great, and yet he takes them to a winning season when maybe no other coach could have, that's your best Coach of the Year. Another coach can do a good job, but his team is filled with all-star players. Well, then you expect them to go further. And maybe they win the championship, but that doesn't necessarily mean the coach was the best coach that year. Same is true with directing. You can have a film that's not necessarily the best film of the year, but when you look at a film like that, like for instance, let's put it this way. Right now, to me, if the Oscars were held tomorrow, A Quiet Place to me doesn't win Best Picture, but John Krasinski wins Best Director. What John Krasinski did with what little he had, well, he had Emily Blunt. Okay, yes, that's a big tool in his tool belt, yes. But what he did with what he had was remarkable. So to me, if the Academy Awards were held tomorrow, Quiet Place gets nominated for Best Picture, but doesn't win Best Picture to me. But John Krasinski does win Best Director. And so like the best analogy I know how to give people when they ask, well, why do the producers, because it's the producer's movie, it's their movie. They're the ones who put everything, and they're the ones who hire the director. And the director, 9 times out of 10, has to get green lights from the producer to go in the direction that they want to go. So that's why when a movie wins Best Picture, the award goes to the producer because it's their film. But the best analogy I know how to give is the sports analogy. Hey, quite often the coach that wins Coach of the Year isn't the team that wins the championship, but it's the coach that did the best with what they had. And I think that's quite often, because there are some movies you watch and it's like, this movie was all direction. Like you can just tell it was all direction. And so that's really the best way I know how to articulate it in just a couple of minutes. But there is a difference between Best Director and Best Picture. Big difference. Big difference. All right, here. Let's move on. Next one comes to us from Murray For Us, who writes, thoughts on Howard the Duck. Why do you want my thoughts on Howard the Duck? Okay, thoughts on Howard the Duck film. I think it's terrible. It's amazing that it was Marvel's first gulp. Do you think, well, first of all, there was no real Marvel Studios at the time, so don't even think of it in those terms. It's amazing that it was Marvel's first film. Do you think they will make a reboot? He did make a cameo in Guardians of the Galaxy. No, they're not going to do another Howard the Duck movie. And quite frankly, as much as I love Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought the Howard the Duck cameo was dumb. I did. I thought it was dumb. I don't like it. So I agree with you. It's a terrible movie. It's a terrible movie. And no, they will not remake it because nobody cares. Nobody wants to see a Howard the Duck movie. They will not remake it. People would not come to see it. That's cool that James Gunn wants to throw him in as a cameo. That's cool. Nothing wrong with that. I don't like it personally, but who cares? The Guardians of the Galaxy was no less brilliant anyway as a result of it. But no, I don't see them making another one. I just don't see it happening. Anything is possible in this crazy business, but I don't see it happening. All right. Murray For Us writes, my issue I have with the Arrowverse is that they're too afraid to kill off a beloved character. So they'll have doppelgangers to compensate the loss. Thoughts? Murray, name me a show other than the rare exception. Like, okay, let's look at Breaking Bad. They never killed off any of their main characters. They never killed off any of their main characters. And it doesn't count when you get to your series finale and there's no more shows to do, or you only got a couple episodes left. I mean, all the main characters live through the entire thing. Is that how come we apply that to the Arrowverse and not to Breaking Bad? You know, lots of shows never kill off beloved characters. There are a couple, Game of Thrones, Sons of Anarchy, but for the most part, most TV shows, like I think it's unfair for us to center out the Arrow shows and go, oh, they don't kill off main characters. Well, hardly any shows do. Hardly any shows kill off beloved main characters. It's so rare. That's why Game of Thrones and Sons of Anarchy like really stand out to people, because they're shows that don't do it. And there are a couple of others, but for the most part, they don't. And look, the fact of the matter is, let's take the Arrowverse. Look, and you know, I'm not a big fan of Arrow right now, but let's take their Laurel from Another Earth, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, in the Arrowverse, you do have the multiverse, so that's a real thing. But that character is not Laurel. They killed off Laurel, thank God. But they killed off Laurel. And yeah, there's a look-alike character from another universe and dimension, but it's not the same character. I mean, if they brought her in from another universe and she acted exactly the same and she had the exact same memories and the only difference is this is a copy of that one, then I could see your point. But like this character, Black Siren or whatever they call her, this new Laurel character is not the same character. That Laurel character died and is gone. And yes, there's a multiverse where there's a bunch of lookalikes, but they are not the same character. So I personally don't really have an issue with that. I really don't. And this is coming from somebody who's not a big fan of Arrow, per se, right? You know, they killed off the Wells character and they brought in a different one. Okay, but to me, it didn't take away the fact that they killed that character. This other character is a different character. And so yeah, to me, it doesn't bother me. To me, it doesn't bother me. As long as they make the characters different, that they are different characters, despite the fact that they look alike, to me, it's no problem. And this character, for instance, the Laurel character, is a radically different character than the one we had before. It's a totally different character. And by the way, speaking of the Laurel character and speaking of Arrow, I just watched the latest episode of Arrow. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Arrow are both shows that I don't like anymore, but because I really like, you know, Clark Gregg and because I really like Stephen Amell, I continue to watch the show, just hoping it gets better. This new episode of Arrow that aired this week is the best episode of Arrow they have done in years. Nay, it is the best episode of any of the Arrowverse shows. Legends of Tomorrow, Flash, Black Lightning, or Arrow. It is the best single episode of any show they've had in the Arrowverse for years. It was a brilliant episode. And here's the thing I've been saying. The last couple of weeks I've been going, hey, on Arrow, it looks like they're admitting some of the mistakes they've made in that show. And it looks like they're going back to the grittier basics of what season 1 and season 2 were. And then this new episode hit. I'm actually getting chills. I loved this week's episode. And if this week's episode is a signal of the direction they're going to be going with this show from now on, I'm starting to get excited about the future of Arrow again. And I have not been excited about Arrow or its future for a long time. But I'm telling you, the last few episodes that they have been doing, and it seems like they're admitting publicly, it seems like they're publicly admitting to the audience, we made these mistakes. And we're kind of turning this corner and we're reinvesting in what used to make this show so good. It makes my heart flutter. And if this news episode, the newest episode was called The Dragon, and it was phenomenal. I ate up this episode. When's the last time you heard me talking like this about Arrow? It's been a while. But I am getting quite excited about the potential future of the show at this point. We'll see. They might crap it. They may totally crap the bed on it, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, where are we at here? Pai Gao writes, if you were involved with DC or Marvel, what would you most likely be responsible for? Probably lunch orders. Yes, if I was plugged into DC and Marvel, probably the extent of my responsibilities would be taking people's lunch orders. That's probably the extent. What would I like to be involved in? I actually did a little bit. I've mentioned this. I've never gone in depth into this, and I never will. But I've mentioned this before. I actually did some side work for a studio before. And it was just a minor thing where it was just a little bit of consulting, where as somebody who, was involved on a daily basis with thousands of film fans, I had this one studio that would just periodically run some scripts, send some scripts over to me, have me read them, and I would just, give them my thoughts on it. And how I think, as somebody who interacts with movie fans, thousands of movie fans on a daily basis, I would just give my thoughts on how I think, this particular demographic, there was a specific demographic I was trying to think of, and how they would react to that. That was fun. I didn't do it for long, but that was fun. I wouldn't mind doing something like that again. Here's the problem, though. It creates a bit of a conflict of interest for me because how can I be impartial about a movie that comes out if secretly I know I was involved? Like maybe I had my hands on that script one time and I gave my input on the script once. Now, I believe, look, the only other studio I've ever taken a paycheck from was Lionsgate. You guys know I was on Lionsgate's payroll for a while because I was doing Comic-Con HQ, which was run by Lionsgate, and my paycheck was literally a Lionsgate paycheck. But you guys know a couple of Lionsgate's films came out during that time, and I crapped all over those Lionsgate's films. Everybody knows my household, we collect paychecks from Hasbro. Hasbro is responsible for 50% of my household income because Ann works for Hasbro. That does not stop me from crapping all over the Transformers movies. So I'd like to think I'd be able to stay impartial, but it does bring it into question. So like if I was working for, I don't know, for argument's sake, let's say I was working for Sony as somebody who did like some coverage on some scripts. I did script coverage a little bit for them. If it was that, it would create the impression of impropriety. So I'd have to be careful about that. But I think if I had the opportunity to do stuff with DC or Marvel, I think I would like to be in one of those advisory capacities. Just something where I take a look at what they got and give them my input as to how I think the audience will react to it. That would be something I could probably see myself doing, maybe, if I ever had the chance. Something I would enjoy. But that's all theoretical. Spencer Smothers writes, you have heard a lot of out there theories, I certainly have, about what others think will happen in Infinity War. But do you have an out there theory that you hope happens in the movie? Oh, a real out there theory that I think actually has a chance of happening in a movie and that I would actually like to see happen in a movie. You know what? I can't think of any off the top of my head. Like ones that I think are really far out there and actually have a legit chance and I would like to see happen. It's a really interesting question, Spencer. But off the top of my head, like there's Cap's a Skrull. I don't think that's going to happen. Thanos is actually just going to be a figment of somebody's imagination. I don't think that's going to happen. Silver Surfer shows up in Avengers. No, that's not going to happen. Nor do I want any of that to happen. So it's a great question. But what do you guys think? Do you guys have any like far out theories that you think that are legit far out that you actually hope happens? I can't think of any off the top of my head, but it's a really good topic for discussion. So guys, jump into the chat section. Let me know what you guys think. All right. We move on now to Matthew Ware, who writes, over or under 99%, we see Thanos in his iconic Thanos copter. I haven't heard anybody mention Thanos copter. Let me, hold on a second. For those of you who do not know what Thanos Copter is, let me see if I can... Okay, hold on a second. Let me bring this over here. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what the brilliance of the Thanos Copter is, it's exactly what you're picturing. That's the Thanos literally riding around in a giant yellow helicopter with the word Thanos printed in giant, impact font type on the side of his yellow helicopter. There is the infamous Thanos Copter. Deep cut, Matthew, for coming up with it. So over under 99%, man, if you had said 91%, I would have taken the over. But I think 99% is a little high. I'll take the under. Okay, you know what? Let's roll backwards here for a second. So the last question was far out theories that I want to see in Infinity War. We move on to Matthew's question, the Thanos Copter. There it is. There's the far out theory that I want to see come to fruition in Infinity War. I want to see the Thanos Copter. That's what I want to see in this movie. All right. Thank you for bringing it up, Matthew. That kind of made my day. All right. Oops. And we had the big jump. This happens every day. Give me a second here. And there are a lot more. Oh, damn. There are a lot of questions. Okay. Ryan just sent in a super chat. Thank you so much, Rose. Appreciate that. Mr. Hank Dunn. I only got about 10 minutes here, guys. So I'm going to try to roll through these. Mr. Hank Dunn writes, love the show, John. Thank you so much. I started doing my own reviews on YouTube, trying to self-promote. Check out my review for Truth or Dare. Well, thank you so much. And look, one of the things I love is I love encouraging people to get involved in online film fan community stuff. Do your own YouTube channel. Do your own podcast. Do your own blog. Do your own stuff like that. I even put together a 2-hour video called Getting Started in YouTubing and blogging and podcasting and being. So do me a favor. If you want to find that, just go on YouTube, search John Campea Getting Started, and you'll find a 2-hour video I did because I really want to encourage more and more people to get involved in doing stuff like this. Look, don't do it if you think you're going to earn a living at it. I can almost guarantee you won't, all right? But do it because it's fun and you enjoy it and you love encouraging the discussion. And maybe 1 in a million of you will actually be able to do it for a living, and that's great if you can, but don't do it for that because you're just going to be disappointed and get disgruntled. But if you're doing it because you're a fan and you just love it and you just want to share with the film fan community, it's a great thing to do. Go check out that video and hopefully you guys can get started and stuff like that. Okay, let's see. ZCMZ Zombie writes, we need a In the Name of Good shirt. Yeah, somebody was pointing out a few weeks ago that one of the sayings I used to say all the time was, in the name of all that is good. And then I would go on to say something I wish would happen. I should say that more often. I haven't said that. I haven't used that phrase in a long time. I need to say that more often. Okay, thanks for bringing that up, ZC. Next one comes to us from Franklin Donahue, who writes, The Equalizer 2 is a film I've been looking forward to. I was shocked to find out its July date. A stacked month for big action movie releases. Ant-Man, Mission Impossible. Why has the studio made the decision? Well, I mean, first of all, new movies come out. No matter when you open your movie, there's other movies coming out. Opening it in the same month as a couple of other big action movies too, it's not such a bad thing. Look, we've made this analogy before. It's about which fishing pond do you want to fish in? Do you want to fish in the pond where there's not as many fishermen, but there's also not as many fish? Or do you want to fish in the other pond where there are more fishermen, but also a lot more fish? Which one do you go? So the fact of the matter is, July is a great month. Kids are off school. So school's out. It's summer. People are on vacation, all that kind of stuff. More people, look, statistically, it's just been proven. More people go to the movies in the summer months than any other time. That's when most people go to the movies. They go to the movies more often in the summer than any other time. That's just statistics. That's just math. So is there more competition? Yes, but there's also more potential audience. There's also a bigot market there. I mean, the other pond, yes, September may not be as many other fishermen. There may not be as many other big action films coming out in September. However, there's also not as much potential audience in September. There's still an audience there. You can put out a movie in September or any month and make a lot of money, yes. But, you know, summer is a great time. If you can find a spot to put out your film and your big action film, your big summer type of movie action film, there's money to be made in the summer. So it goes back to that whole traditional argument. Do you want the pond with more fishermen and more fish, or the pond with less fishermen but also less fish? And so it's kind of that discussion and debate that goes on. But I think it's going to do well. I think it's going to do well. I really do. Let's see. ZC writes, possibility that Maz Kanata is in Solo. Not a bad. If I had to set an over-under for Maz showing up, because clearly they set it up where Han and her go back a ways. That doesn't mean she has to be there, though. But I think there's a legitimate possibility. I'll go 25%. 25% that Maz shows up. I'm hoping she doesn't, because to me that makes the universe feel smaller. But at the same time, there's justification for it, if you want to say, because they clearly say in The Force Awakens that him and her go way back. So there's justification for it, so I'll go 25%. Still unlikely, but possible. Jake C. writes, Spielberg movies you don't like besides Terminal. I honestly, I can't think of any. Maybe 1941. But even 1941 I have an appreciation for. Hold on a second. Even 1941 I have a fairly decent appreciation for. It's not, you know, the best thing, but I mean, dear heaven, remember this cast: Dan Aykroyd, Ned Beatty, John Belushi. It's just Christopher Lee. I forgot Christopher Lee was in that. Oh my goodness. Warren Oates was in it. Robert Stack was in it. I have an appreciation for 1951. I just do. It's one of his older films. But a film of his that I don't like since then? Let me just bring up a bunch of his films here. Let me go through a list here and see what I did not like. Okay, let's see. His last one, Ready Player One, I loved. The Post, I loved. The BFG, I really liked the BFG. Bridge of Spies was brilliant. Lincoln was brilliant. Warhorse was brilliant. Adventures of Tintin was great. Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Here's what I always say about that one. If that wasn't called Indiana Jones, and it was called Guy Giuseppe, Adventurer at Large, and it was almost the exact same movie, just it was called Guy Giuseppe, Adventurer at Large, I contend it's not a bad little adventure film. It just wasn't a good Kingdom one. So if we go back 10 years, that's next on my list. So Terminal, and then the next one I probably like the least would probably be Kingdom of Crystal. Before that was Munich, brilliant film. War of the Worlds, great film. Then you get to The Terminal, didn't like The Terminal. Before The Terminal was Catch Me If You Can, brilliant. Minority Report, brilliant. Artificial AI, Artificial Intelligence, brilliant. Saving Private Ryan, brilliant. Amistad, my favorite Steven Spielberg film. Where to go? I lost my place. Blah, blah, blah. Schindler's List, brilliant. Jurassic Park, brilliant. Hook, I love Hook. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, brilliant. Empire of the Sun, brilliant. Color Purple, brilliant. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, brilliant. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, brilliant. Raiders of the Lost Ark, brilliant. And then we get down to 1941. I still have an appreciation for it. Then before that, you have Close Encounters of the Third Kind, brilliant. Jaws, brilliant. The Sugarland Express, that one I don't remember. I don't remember Sugarland Express. So anyway, but now we're all the way back to 1974. So there's really ain't much that Steven Spielberg has done. Did you just hear that list of movies I just read off? And then people wonder why I say Steven Spielberg is the greatest filmmaker of all time. Dear heavens, what a list. Okay, so ZC then writes again, do you have a holy trinity of the worst TV shows? Now, I don't even watch enough TV to be able to give that. I wouldn't be able to give you any kind of an honest opinion on that, to be frank with you. Jake C. writes, do you think Ancient Aliens has any merit of being on the History Channel? Never watched it, so I can't really give an opinion on that either, Jake. Sorry about that. Ben Hayusa writes, finally saw A Quiet Place last night, and I was amazed by the performances. Performances were off the wall, man. I had a thought, though. Or I had a thought, too. What if one of them had to sneeze? Can you sneeze silently? You can muffle you can stop yourself. Whenever you feel a sneeze coming on, just cover my thing. Or, you know, grab a big blanket and a towel and shove you. But that's an interesting one. What about a sneeze? Or a cough? Heavens, what about a cough? Don't get sick. Don't get sick. And if you do get sick, you got to stay like sealed up somewhere. That's a good thought, though. It's a really good thought. Last question of the day, and we are at an hour. This one comes to us from Folsom53, who writes, just rewatched Walk the Line, and I didn't realize it was directed by James Mangold. There you go. What was your thoughts on Walk the Line? Oh, I loved Walk the Line. I thought it was great. One of the better biopics. And I am not usually somebody who's all that big on musician biopics. Oh my goodness, that movie was in 2005? Really? That was 13 years ago? You know, if I'm not mistaken, I think Reese Witherspoon actually won Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress. It was either Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress. I'm not really completely sure. Hold on, let me just pull this up here quick. Reese Witherspoon won Best Supporting Actress, which was amazing. Joaquin Phoenix got nominated for Best Actor. It was nominated for Best Editing, nominated for Best Sound Design, and nominated for Best Costume Design. But Reese Witherspoon won her Academy Award that year. So, yeah, I appreciate the film quite a bit. All right, guys. That will do it for today's installment of Open Mic. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget, guys, a little bit later today, it is Sunday, so Star Wars talk is coming up later today. Also, I'm going to have my editorial video up here within the next hour or two about James Cameron's comments. I have a few thoughts and opinions on his comments, so we'll get to those a little bit later. Whole bunch of stuff, and then I've got a new editorial video coming probably tomorrow on Final Line. I believe the 5 best directors that do not have an Academy Award. We've been talking a lot lately about the best actors today without an Academy Award. I'm going to do my video on the 5 best directors without an Academy Award, so you guys can debate that as well. So again, make sure you come back a little bit later. Today we got our live Star Wars talk. That's going to be at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That'll do it for me, guys. Thanks a lot for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until my next video, bye-bye.